If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another album review. This time, we're taking a look at the latest studio offering from Polish progressive rock / metal act Riverside with ID.ENTITY, or Identity, if you want to mix it all together. So yeah, me being a big prog fan, I was looking forward to checking this one out. Granted, this is actually the first full-length album I've ever checked out from this band, Riverside. I've heard good things about this band when it comes to the broader progressive music circles, like Cover Killer Nation, people like that who really love prog. Discovered this band, at least by the name, because of Cover Killer Nation, but never gave them a listen until this new album. So I thought, well, I've heard of this band Riverside in circles, maybe I'll check it out and see what it's about, and holy shit was I surprised. I was surprised as to how fun and catchy and diverse a lot of these songs are. Like, top to bottom, like, these songs are varied in their structure, they're varied in how they piece everything together, and varies in feeling and stories that they're telling you. Starting things off with Friend or Foe, you get immediately some like 80s pop moments, 80s synths that just kind of just go all over the place. And like the synths and the keyboards pretty much all throughout this album do a really good job at complementing the music that's going on around it. Like, and especially when it gets into like the more synthy parts within the keyboards, it has a lot of like an 80s synth vibe, which I like 80s synths. I mean, I did talk about that kind of vibe during the Catatonia review yesterday, so it should come to no surprise here. But I also love the riff work and the hooks that come through here on Friend or Foe. They're catchy and infectious. And even like lyrically, all of these songs kind of are tied together into like a theme about modern world. All about like how you deal with certain things. And like for this song, Friend or Foe, it's all about dealing with trust issues from the way I was interpreting it while reading the lyrics while listening to the song. Then we get into Landmine Blast, which has a very quirky beginning, like very proggy because it's lots of time signature changes, some cool bass work, a melodic lead line, and then like the more kind of like circusy guitar trade-offs that you get on this track kind of remind me of the song Chrysalis from Opeth on Sorceress, but also reminds me a little bit of Pain of Salvation a little bit, which was interesting to hear. But then you get another like big riff that just flies in right before it gets into like a quirky clean guitar part to kind of change things up. Now, lyrically speaking, this is mostly dealing with like PTSD and paranoia, which is very interesting stuff whenever you read these kind of stories. Then going into Big Tech Brother, which after like almost like a PSA kind of thing, it gets into this like bass line that reminds me a lot of Tool. Like there are some Tool moments on this album in terms of the bass work. The bass line here and the keyboards begin everything, and then it gets into a riff and rhythm that kind of reminds me of Dream Theater. And there were a couple of times on this album where I got some inklings of Dream Theater influence, especially on this track. And I love the use of the organ and the piano to give this track more emotional weight, even though lyrically it's all about being controlled by technology. Post-Truth, the following track, starts off with this heavy, punchy riff that reminds me once again of Dream Theater, but a lot of the progressions and the melodies on the guitars on this track oddly enough, remind me of Witherscape, Dan Swano's prog mellow death project, which, if you haven't checked out Witherscape, you should check them out, but I digress. And I love how the ending of this song has such a beautiful piano part. And lyrically, this song is dealing with feelings of honesty and deceit. But now we get into the big epic of the album, in my opinion, The Place Where I Belong. The soulful vocals and the acoustic guitar that begins this track reminds me a lot of Opeth. Granted, the vocalist has a little bit of a higher range than Michael Ockerfeld, but the way this vocalist gets more tuneful and soulful kind of reminds me of like what would happen if Michael Ockerfeld's vocals were a little bit higher in his voice. But even the bass line and the riff work on this song kind of brings out some of that Opeth influence. And the Hammond organ, I always love hearing the Hammond organ on stuff because it just sounds powerful and it sounds fun. Like, and especially in this case, like the way they use the Hammond organ here kind of reminds me a little bit of like Deep Purple or even Lynyrd Skynyrd if they use a Hammond organ. And even like some somber acoustic guitars and violin pops in here and there towards the end of the track. But the narrative of this song is basically telling you like to find your place in the world. Go out there and accomplish what you want to accomplish and choose to live your life in the best way you can. Then we get into the track I'm Done With You, which has fuzzy bass work all throughout, kind of bringing a little bit of a fuzz tone to the bass. And really the vibe of this song is more aggressive and angry, not just lyrically, but also in the riff work. And the chorus on here is very fucking spiteful, if I do say so myself. Basically, as the title says, I'm done with you, basically having no more of people's bullshit. And then we get to the final track, the second longest song of the album at nearly 9 minutes, Self-Aware, which lyrically, kind of self-explanatory, no pun intended, with self, but it's kind of telling a story all about a man ignoring all the bullshit in the world and moving forward in life with his wife, which was a really cool lyrical approach. But musically speaking, it's very uplifting and very positive, and that, I think, comes from the influence of Rush. Like, this is probably the most Rush-inspired song of the entire album, because even in the riffs, it feels like Rush. The bass work feels like Rush. The drum grooves feel like Rush. And it's really, really well done. And it was a fantastic way to close this album out. Now, the lead work on this album, it's not very flashy. It's not about showing off, hey, look how fast I can play. Look how shreddy I can play. No, the leads on here kind of have a bit of a Pink Floyd, David Gilmour quality to them in terms of beauty and emotion. The vocals, like I said, the vocalist kind of feels like if Michael Ockerfeld's vocals were a little bit higher, but mixed in with a little bit of like Tobias Forge, and even Surge from System of a Down kind of has a little bit of that in there, I can hear in the voice. These riffs, there's some heavy fucking riffs on here, and they can pack a punch, but there's a lot of great catchy hooks on here. But for me, also the drums were quite varied and were really cool. I love the use of the synths and the keyboards to complement the heavier sections. But for me, the star of the show, the bass. The bass work was very well done, filled with lots of, sometimes some dissonance, some fuzz, and maybe a touch of technicality here on a couple tracks. But the production, granted, it's prog rock and prog metal, so you're expected to get a clean sound. But they were able to make it sound clean, but everything was audible and even mixed. Like, the bass is prevalent throughout, the guitars are not overpowered, the synths were appropriate, the drums are audible, the vocals were done well. Overall, I really can't think of anything to complain about this album. This is another possible album of the year contender. We already have one with Obituary. We might have another one, as I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed this album. Granted, I listened to the standard edition. I know there are 2 other songs on a deluxe edition, both instrumentals, and I'm sure those are great as well. But yeah, overall, 9.5 out of 10 for a hell of a prog masterpiece. But what did you guys think of ID.ENTITY by Riverside? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, horns high, see you guys later.